The knock came like a question mark, soft, hesitant, almost swallowed by the wind. Samuel Grave stood at his kitchen table, hands still dusted with flour from the biscuits he'd been shaping. He'd lived alone for 3 years now, ever since Martha passed, and in all that time, no one had knocked on his door past sundown, not once. The knock came again, weaker this time. He wiped his hands on his apron, eyes narrowing toward the door. Through the window, the last light of dusk painted the Wyoming plains in shades of amber and ash. The cottonwoods swayed like they were whispering secrets to each other. Samuel crossed the room in 5 strides and pulled the door open. A woman stood there, leaned there, one hand pressed flat against the doorframe, the other cradling the swell of her belly. Her dress was torn at the hem, caked with dust and what looked like dried blood. Her face was pale as winter bone, lips cracked, eyes glassy with exhaustion. She opened her mouth to speak. And then her knees buckled. Samuel's body moved before his mind caught up. He lunged forward, arms outstretched, catching her just as she pitched forward. Her weight collapsed into him, dead and heavy, and he staggered back a step, his boots scraping against the threshold. "Ma'am," he started, but she didn't respond. Her head lolled against his chest. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. He could feel the heat radiating off her skin, even through the fabric of her dress. "Fever." Samuel's jaw tightened. He shifted his grip, sliding one arm beneath her knees, the other supporting her back, and lifted her fully. She was lighter than he expected, too light for a woman carrying a child. He turned and kicked the door shut behind him, then carried her across the room to the narrow bed in the corner where he sometimes napped during the day. He laid her down gently, brushing a strand of matted hair from her face. Up close, he could see the bruises, faint purple shadows along her jawline, a darker one near her collarbone. Her hands were scraped raw, fingernails broken. She'd been running. Samuel straightened, his mind already sorting through what needed to be done. Water, blankets, something to bring the fever down. He moved to the stove, poured water from the kettle into a tin basin, grabbed a clean cloth from the shelf. When he returned to her side, she was trembling. Her lips moved, forming soundless words. He dipped the cloth into the water, wrung it out, and pressed it gently to her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open. They were green, pale green, like new grass after rain. They focused on him slowly, struggling to make sense of where she was. "You're safe," Samuel said quietly. "You're in my home." You collapsed. She blinked. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, fingers splaying protectively over the curve. "The baby," her voice was a rasp, barely audible. "Still there," Samuel said, "but you need to rest. You've got a fever and you're—" No, she tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her. She made it halfway before her strength gave out, and she sank back down, gasping. "No, they'll find me, they'll—" "Who'll find you?" She didn't answer. Her eyes darted toward the door, then back to him, wide with something Samuel recognized all too well. "Taro." He set the basin down on the floor and pulled a chair over, sitting so he was level with her. His voice stayed calm, steady. "I don't know who you're running from, and I don't need to, but no one's getting through that door tonight unless I let them. You understand?" She stared at him, searching his face for something, honesty, maybe, or the lie beneath it. Whatever she found, it must have been enough, because her body finally relaxed, just a fraction. "My name's Samuel," he said. "What's yours?" "Eliza." The word came out like a confession. "All right, Eliza. How long have you been walking?" 2 days, maybe 3. She closed her eyes. "I lost track." Samuel's gaze dropped to her belly again. "When's the baby due?" "Soon." Her hand moved in slow circles over the fabric. Maybe a week, maybe less." He nodded, though inside his gut twisted. A week, maybe less. That meant she could go into labor any time. And out here, 15 miles from the nearest town, with no doctor and no midwife. He pushed the thought away. "You need food," he said, standing, "and water, then sleep. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." "There's no tomorrow." Eliza's eyes opened again, locking onto his. "They won't stop. He won't stop." Who? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her face toward the wall, and Samuel saw the tears sliding silently down her cheeks. He didn't press. He'd seen enough in his 47 years to know when someone was carrying a weight too heavy to name. He went back to the stove, ladled soup into a bowl, yesterday's rabbit stew, still warm, and brought it to her. She ate slowly, mechanically, as though her body remembered hunger even if her mind had forgotten how to care. When she finished, he took the bowl and set it aside. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll be right here." Eliza's eyes were already closing. Samuel pulled a blanket over her, then moved back to the table. He sat down, but he didn't return to the biscuits. Instead, he stared at the door, at the darkness pressing against the windows, and listened. The wind, the creak of the house settling. Nothing else. But he knew better than to believe the silence. Somewhere out there, someone was looking for her. And sooner or later, they'd come. Morning came slow and grey, the sky heavy with clouds that looked like they'd been holding their breath for days. Samuel woke in the chair, his neck stiff, his back aching. He hadn't meant to fall asleep, but exhaustion had finally claimed him sometime after midnight. He blinked, orienting himself, then turned his head toward the bed. Eliza was awake. She sat upright, legs folded beneath her, one hand still resting on her belly. Her eyes were clearer now, the fever broken, but the fear hadn't left. It clung to her like a second skin. "You stayed," she said. "Told you I would." She looked away, toward the window. "You don't know what you've done." "Maybe not," Samuel stood, rolling his shoulders to work out the knots. "But I know what I didn't do. I didn't leave you out there to die." "You should have." The words were flat, matter of fact, and they hung in the air between them like a challenge. Samuel crossed to the stove, poured coffee into 2 cups, and brought one to her. She took it with both hands, cradling the warmth. "You want to tell me what you're running from?" he asked. Eliza stared into the coffee. "His name's Garrett Cole." Samuel's jaw tightened. He knew the name. Everyone in Wyoming knew the name. Garrett Cole owned half the cattle in the territory, along with the politicians, the sheriffs, and the judges. He was a man who didn't ask for what he wanted, he took it, and if you got in his way, you disappeared. "He's the father," Samuel said. "It wasn't a question." Eliza nodded. I worked in his house, a maid, her voice broke. She swallowed, forcing herself to continue. "He said I belonged to him, that the baby belonged to him. When I tried to leave, he locked me in a room, said he'd keep me there until the child was born, then he'd decide what to do with me." Samuel's hands curled into fists. "I waited until his men were drunk," Eliza continued, "climbed out a window, ran." "How far?" "From Cheyenne." Samuel let out a slow breath. Cheyenne was 60 miles south, 60 miles on foot, pregnant, with nothing but the clothes on her back. "He'll send men," Eliza said. "He probably already has, and when they find me." "If they find you." She looked up at him, and for the first time, something other than fear flickered in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or the ghost of it. "You'd help me." "I'm already helping you." "You don't understand. Garrett Cole doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. If he finds out you helped me, he'll..." "Let him come." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of iron. Eliza stared at him. "You'd risk your life for me, for someone you don't even know." Samuel set his coffee down. 3 years ago my wife got sick. Fever, same as you had last night. I rode to town, begged the doctor to come. He wouldn't, said he had more important patients. By the time I got back, she was gone." He paused, his gaze distant. "I swore I'd never turn someone away, not for any reason, not ever." Eliza's eyes shimmered. "So you stay here as long as you need," Samuel continued. "And when the baby comes, we'll figure out what happens next, together." She nodded, unable to speak. The moment stretched between them, fragile and unspoken. Then, from outside, came the sound of hoofbeats. Samuel's head snapped toward the door. Eliza's face went white. Stay here, he said, moving quickly to the window. Through the glass, he saw them, 3 riders, moving slow along the road that led to his property. They wore dusters, hats pulled low. One of them had a rifle resting across his saddle. Are they his men? Samuel asked. Eliza had risen from the bed, one hand braced against the wall for support. She looked out the window, and Samuel saw her entire body go rigid. Yes. Samuel's mind moved fast. The barn, the root cellar, the attic, none of them were safe. If the men searched the property, they'd find her. Back to the bed, he said. Pull the blanket over you. Don't move, don't make a sound. They'll search. Not if I give them a reason not to. Eliza hesitated, then obeyed, lying back down and pulling the blanket up to her chin. Samuel grabbed a second blanket and draped it over her haphazardly, making it look like a pile of laundry. The hoofbeats grew louder. Samuel walked to the door, opened it, and stepped outside. The 3 men reined their horses to a stop 20 feet from the house. The one in front, a tall man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, tipped his hat. Mo. Arning, he said. Morning. Samuel's voice was even, his hands loose at his sides. We are looking for someone, the man continued. A woman, pregnant. You seen anyone like that come through here? No. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You sure about that? I'm sure. The man studied him for a long moment, then glanced at the other 2 riders. One of them nudged his horse forward, moving toward the barn. Mind if we take a look around? The scarred man asked. Samuel's voice hardened. I do. The man's smile faded. That's so. This is my land. You're not welcome on it. The scarred man leaned forward in his saddle. You know who we work for? I know. Then you know we don't ask twice. Samuel didn't move. Then I guess you'd better ride on. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Finally, the scarred man straightened. We'll be back, he said, and next time we won't knock. He turned his horse and gestured to the others. They rode off, slow and deliberate, their shapes dissolving into the grey morning. Samuel stood there until they were out of sight. Then he went back inside, closed the door and locked it. The men didn't come back that day. Or the next. But Samuel knew they would. He spent the time preparing. He cleaned his rifle, checked the ammunition, reinforced the shutters on the windows. He moved Eliza to the root cellar beneath the kitchen, a cramped space that smelled of earth and potatoes, but it was hidden and it was safe. Eliza didn't argue. She was too tired to argue. The baby had dropped lower. Samuel could see it in the way she moved, one hand always pressed to her lower back, her steps slow and cautious. She was close now, maybe days, maybe hours. On the 3rd night, Samuel sat at the table, the lamp burning low, his rifle resting across his lap. Eliza sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. You should go, she said quietly. Samuel looked up. What? Leave, take your horse and go. They'll come for me, but they won't chase you, not if you're gone. I'm not leaving. Samuel. I said I'm not leaving. She stared at him, her eyes searching. Why are you doing this? Samuel set the rifle down. Because it's the right thing to do. That's not a reason, not a real one. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, when Martha died, I didn't leave the house for a month, didn't speak to anyone, didn't care about anything. I was whole, and I stayed that way for a long time. He met her gaze. You showing up at my door, it reminded me that I'm still here, that I still have a choice, and I choose to help you. Eliza's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. Thank you, she whispered. Samuel nodded. Then, from outside, came the sound of breaking glass. Samuel was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. Eliza gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Root cellar, Samuel said sharply, now. She didn't hesitate. She moved as fast as her body would allow, lifting the trapdoor in the kitchen floor and descending into the darkness. Samuel waited until she was down, then lowered the door and kicked the rug back over it. He moved to the window, peering through the gap in the shutters. They were back. All three of them, dismounted now, moving toward the house. The scarred man held a torch. One of the others carried a length of rope. "Samuel Grave," the scarred man called out. "We know she's in there. Send her out and we'll leave you be." Samuel said nothing. The man took a step closer. "You're making a mistake." Samuel pulled back the hammer on his rifle. The sound echoed in the stillness. The scarred man stopped. "You really want to die for her? You really want to find out?" Samuel called back. The man laughed, a low, humorless sound. "Garrett Cole doesn't forgive men who cross him, you know that." "Then I guess Garrett Cole can come tell me himself." The scarred man's smile faded. He glanced at the others, then back at the house. "Burn it," he said. One of the men moved forward, pulling something from his saddlebag, a bottle. He stuffed a rag into the top, struck a match, and lit it. Samuel's heart kicked in his chest. The man drew his arm back and hurled the bottle. It shattered against the side of the house, and flames erupted, crawling up the wooden planks like living things. Samuel didn't think. He threw open the door and fired. The shot hit the man who'd thrown the bottle square in the chest. He dropped without a sound. The other two dove for cover, drawing their guns. Samuel ducked back inside, slammed the door, and bolted it. Smoke was already seeping through the walls. The heat pressed against his skin. He had seconds, maybe less. He ran to the trapdoor, yanked it open. "We have to go." Eliza looked up at him, her face pale. "The baby." "I know, come on." He reached down, hauling her up. She cried out, her legs nearly buckling, but Samuel caught her, slinging her arm over his shoulder. The front door exploded inward. The scarred man stood in the doorway, gun raised. Samuel pushed Eliza behind him and fired. The bullet caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He staggered, but didn't fall. Samuel fired again. This time, the man dropped. Smoke filled the room now, thick and choking. Samuel pulled Eliza toward the back door, kicking it open. They stumbled out into the night, gasping for air. Behind them, the house burned. Samuel didn't stop. He half-carried, half-dragged Eliza toward the barn, his lungs screaming. They made it inside just as the third rider appeared, silhouetted against the flames. Samuel raised his rifle. The man raised his hands. "I'm done," the man said. "I'm done. I ain't dying for this." He turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness. Samuel lowered the rifle, his hands shaking. Eliza collapsed against him, and that's when he felt it, the wetness soaking through her dress. "Samuel," she gasped, "the baby, it's coming." Samuel had delivered calves. He'd delivered foals. He'd even helped birth a litter of puppies once, back when he was a boy. But this was different. Eliza lay on a bed of hay in the corner of the barn, her face slick with sweat, her breath coming in short, desperate bursts. Samuel knelt beside her, his hands shaking, his mind racing through everything he'd ever seen, ever heard, ever half-remembered about childbirth. "I need you to breathe," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Slow in and out." "I am breathing," Eliza gasped. "Slower." She glared at him, but she tried. Samuel grabbed a bucket, filled it with water from the trough, and tore a strip of cloth from his shirt. He dipped it in the water and pressed it to her forehead. "You're doing fine," he said. "I'm not," she broke off with a cry, her body seizing. Samuel had no idea what to do. So he did the only thing he could think of. He stayed. He held her hand when the contractions came. He whispered words he didn't think she could hear, words about strength and courage and how she'd already survived the worst. He didn't know if they were true, but he said them anyway. Hours passed. The fire outside had burned itself out, leaving only smoldering ruins where his house had stood. The sky above was black, scattered with stars that felt impossibly far away. And then, finally, Eliza screamed. Samuel moved to her side, his hands ready, his heart pounding. "Push," he said. She did. And then he saw it, the crown of the baby's head. "Again," he urged, "you're almost there." Eliza pushed again, her entire body trembling with effort. The baby came in a rush, slippery and red and impossibly small. Samuel caught it. His hands moved on instinct, cradling the tiny, fragile body. The baby didn't cry. Panic surged through him. He turned the baby over, rubbing its back gently, desperately. "Come on," he whispered, "come on." And then a sound. A small, hiccuping wail that grew louder, stronger. Samuel let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He wrapped the baby in his coat and placed it gently in Eliza's arms. She stared down at the child, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time since Samuel had met her, she smiled. "A boy," she whispered. Samuel nodded, unable to speak. Eliza looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Thank you." Samuel shook his head. "You did all the work." "No," she reached out her hand, finding his. You stayed when anyone else would have run. You stayed when it would have been easier to turn me away. You stayed." Her grip tightened. "Thank you, Samuel." He looked down at her hand in his, then back at the baby, small and alive and perfect. And for the first time in 3 years, Samuel felt something other than emptiness. He felt whole. They stayed in the barn that night. Samuel built a fire in an old metal drum, keeping it small and controlled. Eliza dozed fitfully, the baby tucked against her chest, his tiny fist curled around her finger. Samuel sat nearby, his rifle across his knees, watching the horizon. When dawn came, it brought a rider. Samuel tensed, raising the rifle, but then he saw the badge. A marshal. The man dismounted slowly, hands visible, and approached the barn entrance. "Samuel Grave." "That's me." The marshal glanced at Eliza, then back at Samuel. "Got word there was trouble out here, saw the house." "There was trouble." "Garrett Cole's men." Samuel nodded. The marshal was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Garrett Cole's dead." Samuel blinked. "What?" "Shot yesterday morning in Cheyenne, by his own foreman, apparently. Man snapped after years of, well, after years." The marshal looked at Eliza again. "She the one he was after?" "Yes." The marshal nodded slowly. "Then she's free. Cole's estate is being seized. His men are scattering. No one's coming for her." Eliza let out a sound, half sob, half laugh. Samuel lowered the rifle. The marshal tipped his hat. "You need anything, you send word." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving only dust in his wake. "Samu." Elle turned to Eliza. She was crying, great, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Samuel knelt beside her. "It's over," he said softly. "It's over." She nodded, clutching the baby tighter. "What will you do?" Samuel asked. Eliza looked up at him, her eyes red but clear. "I don't know. I have nowhere to go." Samuel hesitated. Then he said, "You could stay here." "Why not? I'll rebuild the house. Won't take more than a few months. And, well," he glanced at the baby, "a child needs a roof, and you need a place to heal." Eliza stared at him. "You do that after everything?" "I'd do that." She searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her smile, a real smile, fragile but genuine. "All right," she said, "all right." Years later, the house Samuel rebuilt stood taller than the old one, with a porch that wrapped around the front and windows that let in the morning light. Eliza stood on that porch now, watching as a boy, nearly 6 years old, with his mother's green eyes and a laugh that could shatter silence, chased a dog through the tall grass. Samuel came up beside her, his hands dusted with flour. "Biscuits are almost done," he said. Eliza smiled. "He'll be happy, he loves your biscuits." Samuel watched the boy, a quiet pride settling over his features. "He's a good kid," he said. "He is." They stood there together, side by side, watching the boy play beneath the wide Wyoming sky. Eliza reached out, her hand finding Samuel's. He squeezed it gently. And in that moment, surrounded by the wind and the grass and the sound of a child's laughter, they both knew the same truth. Some endings are really beginnings. And some strangers are really family, just waiting to be found.